Hello everyone, welcome to Narain's Life with MS. This is Narain, and oh boy, welcome to Friday Findings. And this Friday Findings, I know you missed me last week because I was doing something completely different, but this week I do have two very interesting stories to share with you, and hopefully you do get a little bit of information out of it. One of the stories, of course, is regarding rates of multiple sclerosis and how they have actually increased um, over the past over the last 2 decades in one country. And not only that, but it also goes to show, the study that I will be discussing also goes to show how there are certain things that are actually being improved. There are certain things that that are obviously relating to uh, higher risks, and what are some of the proponents to that. Apart from that, I mean, of course, there is another very, very interesting article that I have that has been actually conducted by a scientist who has not only seen this links of biomarkers to multiple sclerosis, but also the relationship of certain biomarkers that are usually used for MS, showing up, or their presence in other very similar diseases to MS. So with that said, why don't we get started? So the first article I did want to talk about was, of course, the study done in the UK, where it actually compared, the rates of multiple sclerosis across, a 20-year time difference, and actually found that the rate of multiple sclerosis actually increased from something around the lines of 1,100 or 1,300, or some number per 100,000 cases, um, almost doubling to 2,000, or actually I think it's like 100 117 per 100,000, going all the way up to 232 per 100,000. So you're seeing almost a 2x increase in the rates of multiple sclerosis actually happening in the UK. But apart from that, not only seeing that, and of course this can actually be attributed to better diagnosis tools, better ways of finding out who might and who might not have MS. But apart from that, of course, also noting the fact that if certain places, if certain styles, and definitely in this place we are in this part, we are looking at the socioeconomic status of these patients, where you have patients that have higher socioeconomic status. Of course, their their longevity is growing, their life expectancy is growing, but we are seeing also a rise in life expectancy even in people who are not as privileged, socioeconomically speaking. But because usually when you do have those areas, you will have people who will be use be involved in certain lifestyle choices, which can actually make multiple sclerosis worse, like smoking, or doing certain activities like that. Of course, this article is very interesting, and I do hope you get the chance to read it, because it does have a lot of information regarding not only how MS has actually become much more prevalent in the UK, right? When we are talking about an increase from 0.1% to 0.2%, sure, they're small numbers, but when you're talking about how big these groups are going to get when you are looking at even bigger countries with larger populations, it just means that there is still a lot more to discuss. And of course, another thing is that lifestyle does play a very important part as to how the MS is actually going to progress in your body, in a patient's body, um, depending on their lifestyle. And definitely, unfortunately, your socioeconomic status can also play a game, because you might not have the easiest way of uh, of making the easy decisions to with this kind of condition. But overall, some good news is that, of course, life expectancy has risen across the board for multiple sclerosis patients from a very long time ago, and that is just dealing with the better treatments that are available, the much larger number of treatments that are available, that are still being discovered even to this day, or even being tested to this day. So there, of course, is a lot of hope when taking the entirety of this article into account. So with that said, that is article number 1. Now let's go to article number 2. So on to article number 2, and now this article is actually very interesting because this is covering some of the research that a researcher, Dr. Tanuja Chitnis, has actually covered, especially when it comes to actually finding the relationship between the biomarkers for EBNA1, which tends to exist in majority of the MS patients, and their presence leading to MS. And of course, considering that EBNA1 biomarkers are pretty much present in a majority of individuals, as a result, it is actually comparing it to not one but two different cousins, cousins to MS, so neurological disorders that are connected, or that are related to an MS, but do not have as high a comparison to EBNA1 as we as MS does. So for this, one thing that Dr. Chitnis discovered was that the relationship of this EBNA1 biomarker existing to an MS patient is, of course, is close to almost in the 90s. We are talking 92 to 93%, that EBNA1 biomarkers are available or are present in multiple sclerosis patients. But of course, when we are talking about their cousins, and these cousins are called, of course, MOGAD and NMOSD, the full forms of MOGAD. I mean, I will have to read, and my handwriting is terrible, so I will be taking off my glasses for this. So MOGAD is myelinolicodendrocyte glycoprotein antibody associated disorder, and NMOSD is neuromyelitis opticospectrum disorder. So both MOGAD and NMOSD actually have much lower prevalence in patients with the EBNA1 markers, and they are almost very close to the EBNA1 markers that will be present in regular people who do not have any of these medical conditions. So just another thing to note is, while I mentioned that about 92% of MS patients are EBNA1 positive, usually you will see a much lower number, I think in the 80s for MOGAD, and then in the 60s for NMOSD. Whereas with the general populations that do not have any of these three medical conditions, they will probably have it in the 70% range. So of course, what this goes to show is that there is much higher likelihood of EBNA1 connected to MS. But of course, one thing that still stands is that there might be people who actually do have multiple sclerosis and still do show a negative EBNA1 marker. And I think Dr. Chitnis explains it very, very well when she says that the reason for this could be that either either technology hasn't caught up enough to be able to detect the EBNA1 antibodies, or they might be remaining, or they might be there, or they might not be there, but it is very difficult to tell. Sometimes the technology is not good enough, or the study was just not done the best way that it could have been. So this of course is another very interesting article, just pretty much linking and differentiating and pretty much outlining how EBNA1 is just so closely related to MS. And of course, knowing that, and and knowing that, and scientists just like Dr. Chitnis, and of course she is most likely a medical professional herself, with these kinds of studies, when they can actually create that direct correlation between EBNA1 and MS, they can actually look to find ways to definitely limit or prevent EBNA1 from occurring, saving future populations with MS. So that of course is the second article. I hope you find it very interesting, but of course you can read all of that using the links in the description section. So what did you think of both of these articles? Now the one thing I will definitely say is that it is very interesting to know that there is a higher prevalence of MS happening like being detected currently as opposed to 20 years back, right? Being someone who is nearly 17 years into their disease, I was definitely, I actually consider myself a little lucky on the fact that it was definitely detected at that early stage, when obviously we hadn't advanced to the extent we have advanced now. But also the fact that I never knew that MS had cousins, and those cousins are very long named. I mean, I thought multiple sclerosis was long enough, but clearly I don't know anything here. But of course, with that said, do share your thoughts, your insights, your comments, your experiences, and of course do share your own opinions on what you thought of these two articles. As always, the links to these two articles will be shared in the description section, so you'll be able to read it at your own time, or at your own leisure. And of course, do share all of your do share all of your comments so that we can get the conversation started. And with that said, I do want to note that it is Friday, so I do hope you have planned something very nice for your weekend. And apart from that, here am I, Nareen's Life with MS. Of course, I am Nareen, and here's me wishing you a good night, sweet dreams, and I'll catch you tomorrow. Bye.